I appreciate everybody coming. I recognize a couple names on here, so appreciate you guys popping on. Welcome with our guest host tonight, Coach Josh Bullock. Coach Bullock has been a really good friend of mine for quite some time now. He's spent time in the college game as a strength conditioning and performance coach with USOC in the United States Olympic Committee and ski and snowboard teams. And now is doing some consulting business within the performance realm. So I have a ton of respect for Coach Bullock. And in fact, a couple of years ago, we had Coach come on and speak to many of our staff at Penn State about some different things that they did with the ski and snowboard team. And lucky to have him join us tonight. So very informal, kind of like we talked about a couple weeks ago with this community. We're trying to just build community across all of our athletes. I will mention that we do record this for record keeping sake. If anybody wants this from an athlete perspective, if they'd like a recording of this, we will share, but we don't broadly disseminate this. So anything that's said, anything that's brought up in this, it's not going to be disseminated broadly. So what we want to try to do, though, is to take different people from different sports, different perspectives, and then just to join in a conversation around performance. And I think that'll help us over time. Talk about community always. A lot of our fueling stations, we discuss fellowship around just learning from one another, veteran athletes talking to young athletes, peers, and talking to one another, coaches, staff talking with athletes. The more we have in terms of community, the stronger we'll be. We define this as a community of practice. A community of practice is just a group of people that are trying to jam to the same beat, go in the same direction, but come from a lot of different perspectives. And that's us on any given team. A couple current events for us, just as we are sitting here about a week and a half from spring break. We're right in the thick of midterms. So do everything we can to get ahead as student athletes now so that we can take that stress off our plate. We don't have to worry about it. And then we can make sure that we're going into spring break strong. State Patty's Day, obviously this weekend on campus. So we got to make sure we're making really good decisions. Obviously be a human being, be a person, but make sure you run around with buddies and take care of one another. Understand that downtown is going to be really busy. And we just want to always make right decisions because everything that we do from a health and lifestyle choice perspective will influence us in some way or another down the road. And then lastly, spring break. We'll talk about this later and we'll send out a lot of things for our athletes, but plan ahead on spring break. Just like we said with State Patty's Day, make sure we're planning ahead. You have a plan, you have buddies. I mean, even as far as just taking care of your skin, have a plan for spring break and what you're going to do. So without taking too much additional time, Coach, I have pushed you. You are the co-host now, and you should be able to share screen if you need to. Anything you want, you don't have to, but it's full reign under you. And I really appreciate you being here with us today, and everybody today. Thank you guys for being with us.
Yeah, right on. Appreciate that, Coach. What Coach didn't tell you is that we actually met when I was fortunate enough to try to fill the size 15 shoes that he left at his alma mater. So I ended up being the strength coach at his alma mater, which is how we got connected. So pretty cool way to connect. But anyway, I thought a lot about what I wanted to talk to you about because it's kind of a short amount of time to really dig into some topics with a great deal of depth and breadth. But I thought I would share a book with you that I really enjoyed that was recommended to me by a mentor. And the person who wrote it is a man named Trevor Mowad. Trevor Mowad is a graduate of Occidental College, which ironically enough, I played 15 miles down the road from him at another small college. So I had heard of Trevor. We were actually in college at the same time. And then, fast forward down the road 10 years, and Trevor's an author and he's the director of sports performance at Exos. Sad story, Trevor Mowad recently passed away from cancer. So what this book is really kind of his, I guess it would be probably his legacy and what he's left to the sporting world. I think it's an outstanding book. And a lot of what's in the book is what we talked to our kids about when I was with the US ski team. So I spent, a little over half a decade traveling around the country with skiers or traveling around the world with skiers. So a lot of what Coach Nelson has done here for y'all in terms of the Performance Academy, we called the same exact thing. We called it Road to Gold. So Coach Mowad or Trevor Mowad was certainly one of those lectures. So anyway, to pose a couple of quick questions straight out of the gate that I think are fundamental to the book. First one is, what do you suppose is the most effective way to think about your sporting performance and why? And it's kind of a loaded question, but do you think positive thinking, negative thinking, what kind of thought do you feel is the most appropriate to get the best performance out of yourself? So it's a little bit of a sports psychology question. Feel free to pop on and let's fire away. Positive. Yeah, you can fire in the chat too. Any others? I'm pretty informal, so I'll start calling names.
I'll vote for positive as well.
Positive. Oh, neutral. Positive. Sweet. Perfect. Why do you suppose if you answered positive or you answered neutral, why?
I'll say if I'm thinking positively, I've already got some positive mojo flowing. It's already just getting some positive energy around me, maybe giving me a smile, just some positive energy.
Right. Perfect. All right, I'll jump forward. Yeah. Positive boost your confidence. Yeah, I've heard that one before too. Yeah, that's great. Perfect. Now let's think about a time when maybe you had a coach or a professor or a boss that you were like, me and that person, we're not vibing. I don't like that person. We got a real problem, right? Let's say it's a professor, just because I think that's something that everybody here can probably relate to. And you're like, I don't like that professor. All right. So the question then is because you don't like that professor, are you going to half-ass your assignments and out of spite for the professor? Because the question then is, well, who does that hurt? Does the professor lose or do you lose? Right? If you complete the task and you successfully do your job, quote unquote, then at one point, if you do that repetitively enough, then you earn the grade that you want. Or when you get into the professional world, you're in the promotion, or in the sporting world, maybe you earn a starting job or something along those lines, right? So it's really about how do you handle the situation and taking the situation for what it is. So that's kind of something that you want to keep in mind as we move forward. The book goes through a number of different chapters and a number of different behaviors, but I'm going to cover the three of them straight away. And that's positive, negative, and neutral thinking. Negative thinking is that's like probably the worst thing that you can do. Trevor calls it stinking thinking. And I use that same terminology with my daughter, and I use it in my weight room now. Like, there's no such thing in the weight room as negative self-talk. So if you say something, I can't do this. How do you know you did not try? You need to try. And then after that, we'll work on it. And I do the same thing with my daughters. No stinking thinking. It's cynical. And if you want something to come true that's bad, start talking and thinking negative, especially if you talk about it. Positive thinking. Positive thinking has a bit of bias. So if you honestly think that everything is always going to be great, unfortunately, that's not necessarily always the real world, right? And a lot of what happens in sport performance and sport culture is out of our control, right? You don't control whether you win or lose, because you can't control the officials, you can't control the opponent, let alone if you're a team sport, all of the opponents or one opponent. You can't control the opposing coaching staff, and you can't control what happens with your own teammates. So acknowledging that for what it is probably pretty critical, and that we want to make sure that we have good feelings about moving forward, and we believe in ourselves and we talk positively to ourselves from an affirmative standpoint, but we also aren't so unrealistic that we don't think that we could ever be beaten. Does that make sense? Or defeated? So that leads us to the third point, and I can't remember who said neutral thinking. Probably read the book. Jake said neutral thinking. There you go. Neutral thinking is recognizing the present for the present, and the present determines the present. But with the caveat that we recognize that our behaviors today influence our outcomes tomorrow. Does that make sense? So, yeah, there you go. There you go. So anyway, that's neutral thinking. It's acknowledging the moment for what it is, acknowledge the opportunities that are being presented to you at that time, or the challenges that are being presented to you at that time for what they are, and then controlling your reaction to them. Does that make sense? So I'm going to share my screen really quick. And I know might get me in a little bit of trouble because Nick Saban's a bit of an Alabama guy, but I think you'll see some of what's in what I'm talking about here. Let me know when, Coach, give me a thumbs up when you can see that. All right. So the book is called It Takes What It Takes. And you'll see that Nick he references some of the stuff in the book. This whole entire speech is taken almost verbatim from the book. But you can hear him reference the book in it.
These guys sort of they all think they have this illusion of choice. Like I can do whatever I want to do. And we kind of have a younger generation now that doesn't always get told no. They don't always get told this is exactly how you need to do it. So they have this illusion that they have all these choices. But the fact of the matter is if you want to be good, you really don't have a lot of choices because it takes what it takes. You have to do what you have to do to be successful. So you have to make the choices and decisions to have the discipline and the focus to the process of what you need to do to accomplish your goals. And all these guys that think they have a lot of choices are really, sort of sadly mistaken. And I think, as we all have done with our own children, they learn these lessons of life as they get older. And sometimes the best way to learn is from the mistakes that you make, even though we all hate to see them have to make them. And we don't really condone it when they do.
Sweet. So you can hear
$69 US special forcing device turns men into beasts. It emulates
now I'm getting YouTube commercials. All right. Anyway, so you can hear kind of the reference in the book where he references straight away. It takes what it takes, and that's verbatim from the title of the book. And so you can kind of take these three elements: the negative thinking, the positive thinking, and the neutral thinking. That's all great, but then what do? Right? It's fine to say I'm going to think positive, or I'm going to try to avoid to think negative, and I'm going to do my best to think neutral. And in the book, Trevor goes through a number of different strategies to help you, but I'll share with you the three that I think are probably the most beneficial. And the first one is hard choices, and it speaks directly to that video from Nick Saban and that level of commitment that it requires to reach elite performance. And a lot of my student athletes and a lot of my athletes with the ski team, they're like, we clearly define what commitment is. And so what I would like for you to do now is just take a crack at what do you believe commitment is? If you want to chime in, jump on, or you want to type it in the chat, you can. And then I'll share with you the definition that I've provided to my athletes over the last 18 years.
I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is a little shaky. What was the word that you were saying?
Commitment. How you define commitment.
Thank you.
Staying disciplined, that's good. Yeah, full investment, what you're willing to sacrifice. Yeah, absolutely. All elements of commitment, no doubt about it. Over the last 18 years, I've defined commitment with my student athletes: constant effort. Exactly. I've defined commitment with my athletes as putting what you want most ahead of what you want now. And those challenges, those barriers, those unfortunate opportunities are everywhere. The pitfalls, right? It's like, I'm at a restaurant. What choices do I make? Do I want the 12% body fat, the 10% body fat, or do I want that cookies and cream? Do I really want to make sure that I stay injury free? And if that's the case, do I get out of bed 15 minutes early or 15 minutes late? It's all of those little pitfalls and every single little choice that you have that really determines that. And that's how we've defined a commitment. Let me give you an example of what that looks like in the real world. So with my skiers, and I've never worked in Division I athletics, so I'm not as familiar with what y'all's travel schedule looks like, but I can tell you that in Olympic skiing, you travel like 250,000 miles a year as the crow flies, and you're probably in like 20 countries over the course of the year. I don't think there's another sport in the world that travels like they travel. So it's pretty intense travel. And we're not talking to like you're in Salt Lake and you're down the street in Provo. It's like you're flying from Finland to America to China in the course of 10 days and then back. So it's a heavy duty travel. So your commitment, what you want most, putting what you want most ahead of what you want now is paramount. And then what that looked like I'll give you one example. One athlete who we had win a silver medal in the last games. Every single morning, without exception, 365 days a year, wakes up every single morning before training, and she goes through an entire like 30 different steps, full body foam roll, without exception, every single day. Goes through her whole training routine, and then at night, even when we're on the road, she will go out and she will scoop snow to ice bath at night. So that's the kind of commitment that I'm talking about, and that's kind of how that's defined. So if you want to achieve at the highest level, that's what commitment really looks like. That's how few choices you have. The next one is verbal governor. Coach, give me a shout if I'm running over. Fall in love with the sound of my own voice here. All right. So verbal governor is really gauging your language and your exposure. And I alluded to this earlier. Saying something negative about yourself, or especially about yourself to yourself, or about yourself to someone else, is the worst decision that you could possibly make. Like, it's almost guaranteed that that's what's going to happen. So if you don't verbalize it, that's the first step. Do not verbalize it. The second thing is you need to filter your exposures. Raise your hand if you're on, or I assume y'all are on social media. I assume that that's the case. I can't do it anymore. Like, it's just like constant, like I got to be really careful with who I pick in my network, right? Because there's a lot of negativity out there. And I don't really try not to expose myself to that, because that makes me a negative person. Like, I can absorb that and then I immediately reflect it onto somebody else. And I try not to do that. So I try not to be that catalyst for negativity. So you need to, filter what comes into your stratosphere, because it can be contagious and it can tear you down. And enough people telling you that you're not good makes you immediately believe that you're not good. And if you don't believe me, think about every athlete who said, all the naysayers told me this and I proved them wrong, right? And how many people survived that? Very few. But how many people were torn down by that because they didn't have a strong enough filter? More than you'll ever know, or you or I will ever know. And there's a bunch of research out there on this topic, but the human brain actually absorbs negativity at 7 times the capacity of positive. So negative emotion, negative news, it attracts people. And so you need to make a conscious effort to filter that, especially when it comes to the media and your performance, because they're out there. The next one, what's the best way that you can sort of promote yourself? And this goes back to what Coach is talking about, like these affirmations, right? The process of, I'm going to tell myself I'm so good, and you're going to be your own marketing campaign manager in your own head. Like, you're going to constantly verbalize what you're working on, how it's going, and how far it's come along. And so you are affirming your growth and your potential, and you're using your own mind as your own marketing campaign. The human mind has 60 to 120,000 thoughts a day. You need to be in control of that. Okay. And then the last little piece here before I let it run long, the program values that I established for my first strength and conditioning program in 2006 were attitude, effort, and attention to detail. Not coincidentally, they're the same ones I established at Coach Nelly's alma mater. And there's a reason for that. The reason is they're within our control. You can control your attitude every single day without exception. You can control your effort, how hard you're going to try, and you can control whether or not you're going to pay attention to the nitty-gritty, the details. Those 3 things are within your control. The outcome is not. And acknowledging that is important, and controlling what you can control is key. When I got hired at a college here, I won't tell you the name of it because I don't want to give you I don't want to throw this person too far under the bus, but the person in the interview actually told me, man, I read some of your stuff. I saw your website, I saw your LinkedIn, and I personally don't think that you probably could have got those results doing a little bit less work. Like, I feel like you're a little over the top. And I was like, oh, noted. And in my head, I honestly thought, yeah, it takes what it takes. And that's just is what it is. So, and that's another example of like having this like sort of filter, but also understanding you can control what you can control. And then, as always, it takes what it takes. So with that, that's what I got for you in like a really quick nutshell. So I'm happy to take questions about the book, about anything performance related, and any of it. I'm wide open to it.
I think that was awesome. Great reminders, great thoughts. I have a lot right now thinking, but what kind of questions do we have from the book conversation, or just mind flow right now? Devon, what you got, Biggie?
So as far as like insight goes, how important is like perspective as far as just developing like good habits and such?
How important is it to develop good habits?
Like good habits, being a leader, et cetera, et cetera. Like how important is perspective in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly important. You talked about leadership, and I'll let me revert back to one of those values, right? Attitude. And I think pretty much all of us would agree that attitude is contagious. Like, if you're a positive person, you surround yourself with positive people. And that's not coincidental, right? And your attitude, if you're positive, you'll attract those same people. And you can change a culture by adopting those things. And I've seen it happen on a department-wide scale, but it's definitely it's within your power and your capability to do it from a team or position group or any of those types of things, small collective groups.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What about, so I think it's easy, I'll be even the one that said, I initially said positive thoughts because I want to think that always, but we've all been in that situation, I was a baseball guy in college, and there's always that situation. I'm getting ready to step in the box. I'm thinking positive thoughts. And then really quickly, it's like, oh no, a negative thought comes in. So how can we, what are some maybe tools there to quickly flush those negative thoughts out?
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys all, you ever practice meditation? I'm not a great meditator. I'll say that. Like, I'm about as high strung as they come. But I think one of the things that they teach in meditation, and one of the things that I preach to my athletes when they're doing like recovery or regenerative work is, and this is not my material. I stole this from Dr. Bill Sands, so it's not I don't own it. But his recommendation was to write the thought on a whiteboard in your head, acknowledge it, and wipe it, and move on. Okay, that was good. You can acknowledge the person made a great pitch. But does that have any bearing on the next pitch? No, it has no bearing. Zero. All you can say is in that moment is, that was a nice pitch. And now you can gear yourself up for whatever happens next. So it's inevitable that everyone at some point is going to get beat. And so how we handle that, or how we move on from that, becomes fairly critical. And acknowledging your opponent's success for a moment is great. And then after that, you need to figure out what you're going to do next to counter it. And so I think it's thinking about your next action might be the answer there.
Dr. Newman, how you doing?
Good. It's good to see you. Josh, that was really interesting. And I had a question. You've gone from both, team sports now to a very individual sport, and skiing, skiing is brutal, in terms, my daughter's a racer.
Okay.
And I know that it's really tough. I mean, there's very few positions at the national level. The whole point system is brutal. one small mistake and your race is done.
Right.
So what is it like balancing or going from a team sport in the role you're in to a very individual, high intensity, high pressure sport, or see similarities?
Yeah, it's very similar, remarkably. I don't really see like a ton of difference necessarily. Believe it or not, a lot of my athletes with the ski team are very similar to my athletes when I was at Redlands or at Emory and Henry. They think the same. They're as hungry as those kids. They give the same effort. They still have the same insecurities and they still have the same passions, which is still, pretty wild. The difference, I think, probably between the two groups is the exposure. Number one, if you're out there by yourself, you saw it with Michaela Schifrin in the games, right? Like they crucified her. And that kind of goes back to a lot of the man in the arena kind of conversation. But when you fail in an individual sport, and especially on that stage, people know about it. And whereas an individual or as a team sport athlete, sometimes that can be masked by your peers. But the one thing that I will say is if you're in a good individual sport culture, that the group that you're around, if the values are right, they'll pick you straight back up in the same way that a team sport would. So from that standpoint, it's very similar as long as everybody buys into the same ideas and behaviors.
Sarah, thanks for joining us. What you got?
Yeah, so I was actually going to ask something along the same lines with the individual sport question. So I'm on the women's golf team here at Penn State. And as you know, it's very individualized. And we travel with 6, but there are 11 on the team. So we leave half the team at home when we're traveling.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be kind of intense when you're getting picked for those travel spots. And like can sometimes be animosity here and there about who gets it. So, and a lot of the girls also come from very individual junior level where there's not any team aspect whatsoever. So I was just going to ask like kind of your perspective on building those like mutual values that you were just talking about to kind of create that culture within a team of a lot of individuals with a lot of different values.
Yeah, definitely. That's a tricky one. And, but I think that there is a good way to go about business. And here's what I would say. Just because someone else has success doesn't detract necessarily from you. That person's success is owned by them. We can congratulate them and uplift them. And then when the opportunity for you or one of your teammates to have success, then that person is then supported and elevated. Does that make sense? And that's one of the things that I saw a lot. The ski team, there is in the sport that I work with, there's no one dominant athlete, right? Like Michaela dominates alpine. I work with mogul skiing. It's pretty spread out. Like the success is pretty, we have a 2 or 3 at the top, and then there's kind of another like mid group that strikes fairly frequently. And then there's kind of the ones that don't strike the podium very much. And when any one of them gets on a podium, it's like they got on a podium, because I think at that point they realize like that person's success, we want to be happy for them because they had success doesn't mean less for me. It means more for us. Does that make sense? So hopefully that makes sense. And then the other thing that that we tried to instill in our athletes, and this is, I'll tell you a story. Do y'all know who Jim Kelly is? Me and Coach Nelly and a few of the coaches, maybe the only ones. But Jim Kelly went to the Super Bowl 4 times and lost 4 times. Fast forward 20 years later, right? Jim Kelly gets diagnosed with cancer. And he comes on and he says, you know what? All that work, losing and all those tears, losing in 4 Super Bowls and all that effort that I felt like was for naught, wasn't for naught. It was because I needed to beat cancer now. So all that training and all that turmoil that he went through emotionally wasn't because he was losing in the Super Bowl. It's because it was preparing him to beat cancer. So just because what you do now doesn't immediately reap rewards in the very short term, doesn't mean that you're not preparing for something that's going to happen to you down the road in your life. Could be a job interview, could be a relationship, could be a social thing, could be a lot of different things. But I know Coach Nelly, and I know he works across learning domains. And so what you're getting is this holistic development. So celebrating each other's successes, but also realizing the bigger picture is pretty critical.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
TJ, what's up, man? You're up, baby.
Hey Josh, thanks for hopping on. It's been awesome. I have a quick question about just tools to mentally prepare for big games. Maybe could be the night before or just the week leading up or seconds before the game starts. But I'm on the men's lacrosse team, and I'm curious about how you kind of prepare your athletes, because obviously I think Coach Newman would mention that one small mistake on a ski slope, like you can mess up your whole race or get injured. But just how do you prepare those guys to do their best with all their training, but just really in the moment, just get into that zone and do it?
Yeah, for sure. This is a good question. One of the elements of Trevor's book is called Have a Plan. So it's called It Takes a Plan, right? It's all plays off if it takes what it takes. But I'll say this, with my athletes, when we were going to the games in 2018 and 2022, there's two things that were absolutely critical. Number one, a routine. So whatever you do every time, that's what you do every time. So like that girl who I told you, who did the rolling in the morning and the ice bath at night, every night before competition, she'll watch film, she'll develop a plan of attack for the course, and then the next day she'll go out and execute it. So she has a plan. So that helps kind of alleviate some of that anxiety. And within that plan, here's the more important piece. So then this is where your coaches can really help you, and where you can really help yourself if you have this element. And that's an intentional focus. So if you have one thing that you're going to try and do to get better or improve upon, or you need to execute, that should be your direct focus, whatever it is. And that works for both training and competition. So with our athletes, I'll give you an example. So in mogul skiing, you ski a bump section, then you hit a jump that probably launches you like 25 or 30 feet in the air. You ski another long bump section. And then you hit another jump, and then you ski another bump section. So we would always give our athletes, hey, this is your intentional focus in skiing. If you're going to be on the podium, or you're giving yourself a chance to be on the podium, if you can get over on the right ski every time, you need to just make sure that's your intentional focus. And when you hit the jump, you need to have a great takeoff. So all the athlete is thinking the whole time they're going down the course is, I need to be on my right ski, and when I hit a jump, I'm going to take off. So they have an intentional focus for their skiing, and they have an intentional focus for their jump. And the coaches don't cloud their minds with anything else. That's the only thing that they talk about. They don't talk about winning, losing, time, none of it. They only talk about, this is what you need to do to be successful or to give yourself a chance. And I think that same thing can be had from a technique and tactic standpoint in a lot of different sports. Does that make sense? And I think probably it applies to lacrosse as well, especially from a tactical standpoint, because I don't imagine you're probably spending a lot of technique time in a team sport environment, but in an individual sport, the attentional focuses were very like singular focus, sometimes technical.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're at 8:05, just being informal. Devon, I'll get to you here one second. Just at 8:00, we're 8:05. If anybody needs to pop off, feel free to. I put the book that Coach Bullock is talking about in the chat. Feel free to check that out. If anybody needs this, any information from this, hit me up. And what I'll do, anybody on here, I've got your emails. I'll send this recording to you and help follow up so you have the content. But feel free to jump off as needed. If you'd like to stick around, we can stick and talk. Devon, you're up, bubby.
I was just thinking about, like you were saying earlier, how it's such a like individualized sport.
Mm-hmm.
But from my understanding, it's still essentially like a team situation, kind of like wrestling. Individual score points that goes towards the team. How do you get the athletes to put aside like their wants for like team objectives, if you know what I mean?
Their individual agendas. Did I get that right, Devon?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. Getting them to put aside their individual agendas. I think we probably we did it in a number of different ways. I've kind of alluded to a few more, but I'll dig a little deeper for you here. At the beginning of every season, we sat down and we talk about what we value. So we established our own team values for every team. So team from 2022 that has their own values independent of team 2021. And that really guides the way that we behave. Does that make sense? And we, after every event, we would announce where we stand in what's called the Nations Cup. And the Nations Cup is kind of like the Directors Cup in NC2A athletics. It rewards the best team in the world. Like the Directors Cup awards the best athletic department in the country. So it's kind of the similar kind of thing. And so we would update our team and who scored points. And when the team did well, we scored points. We celebrated the contributors of the points. And most times it's pretty rare that we would have someone at an event that wouldn't contribute at least a point. You only got to finish in the top 30 to get a point. So, and every little point contributes to the end when we would win the Nations Cup. Now, I'll tell you kind of where that started and where it ended up. So the last time, before I arrived, the last time the team had won an Olympic medal was in 2010, I think. And so they didn't win one in 2014. We didn't win one in 2018. I arrived in 2017. 2022, we won a medal. And the point I'm trying to make is we didn't start winning medals until we started winning the Nations Cup. And we didn't start winning the Nations Cup until we celebrated each other's successes. So a lot of those things, like who we were, like if you look at like the All Blacks culture, they stole some stuff from there, like the no dickheads line, right? Like some of that stuff. So there was some stuff that was poached from there. They used their own language on some others, but it really revolved around, hey, we're going to be the teammate we would want for ourselves. And that's kind of the fundamental message.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully that helps. That answers your question.
Yes, sir. Oh, and given that it's such a like I said, it is along the lines of like the individual objectives. How do you like build a strong team chemistry? Especially like what the young lady said. I don't remember. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name currently.
Sarah? Yeah.
Yeah, what Sarah said. It gets very competitive, and there is some like animosity there. How do you maintain like the team chemistry and like the overall just spirit of the team?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I mean, every kid that goes up on the top of that course, and every kid that I've ever coached, honestly, they every single one of them wants to win. That they all want to win. But the difference between the ones that want to win and the ones that want to compete is different. Does it make sense? So the ones that want to win, they like to win. They're all good when we're winning, believe me. But the ones that like to compete, they've already acknowledged that there's a chance that they could get beat. And those are the ones that are scary. So with our kids, we never really talk about winning. We just talk about competing and putting ourselves in a position where we have a chance to win. Because once again, none of that's within our control. And if we can do that, then everybody is pushing to get to the next level. So if one kid comes up and does a trick and it's really good, then the next person in line is like, yo, high five, great job. Because kind of once again, like their success doesn't take away from me. Their success is their own. And when I'm successful, I want that person's support. So those are sort of the expectations that were laid out. And as a coaching staff, our job was to hold those athletes and those kids to that expectation. It was just sort of one of those things that was like, hey, if you're going to pout, then go to the bus, so we'll see you at the home. But it didn't really happen with our group that much because we had gotten in front of that to a good extent.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Does anybody have anything else? Ryan, I see what you're saying here too. Winning versus competing. That's huge. That's huge.
Nobody
Great
wins
takeaway.
every time, but the ones that you want the dogs, that's the ones that are willing to compete. They're willing to lay it on the line when they know there's a chance they could fail. And when you have that, you got a chance.
Love it. Was there anyone else have anything specific we want to ask, talk about? The platform's here, so let's definitely use it. I'll say two, maybe something comes up after we pop off and something comes to your mind. If you have a question later, shoot me an email, shoot me a text. I'll put my cell here. Shoot me a text anytime we can get the questions answered. I can hit up Coach Bullock and we'll get the answers. Our next performance school would fall over spring break in 2 weeks. What we're going to do is postpone one more week after that. So we'll come back after spring break. We'll send some information. Biggest thing I keep thinking about is just this is a community. So the more people that we can have from different sports, the better. It's going to offer different perspectives. We'll have a guest come in that's got unbelievable background, give different perspectives. So the more people we can have, the better. Another thing I'll say is keep charging your whoops. What a tremendous resource we have here. Pat Kraft, Dr. Kraft has really afforded us the opportunity to have some really neat things. So make sure you're charging that. Make sure you're engaging with your performance staff, whether it be your athletic trainer or your strength coach. Obviously, you can hit me up on the cell. But really appreciate everybody for being here with us today. Coach, appreciate it, man. It's good to talk to you. It's been a while, but thanks always for your time. And everybody, thank you so much. If anybody ever needs anything, please let us know.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all, and best of luck the rest of the way to all of you. And Coach, appreciate you as always. Hit your boy with some feedback. Let me know how it went, and you don't have to go easy on me. I can take it, man.
Sounds
Hit me
great.
with the real story.
I will.
All right.
I'll send it to you. Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.